It's all about humanity. About humanity.
Alright, welcome back to another video. I'm joined today with Brotein and Tricky. Thanks for joining, guys.
Hello, hello.
Hey, how's it going?
We're going to start off with builds, first of all, and go over your power-ups and what kind of weaponry you want to be using as Commando. Tricky, you want to start us off by telling what you run in exotics in your suit?
Yeah, so I bounce back and forth between the crit versus devastation. That seems to be one of the big questions. Do you need to have devastation to be competent in battlefields? I don't think that's the case. I think you can get by fine just with the crit chance increase. If you feel like going for devastation, it's certainly an option, but I wouldn't refrain from joining the battlefield scene just because you don't have devastation. I think it's you can get by with either one.
Yeah, I used to swap often just to compare DPS numbers. I didn't really see any difference between them. Like, dev is obviously nice to have, but I kind of think it's really for the clout because overall devastation paired with Juggernaut, obviously it helps stack dev, but having just straight up heavy weapon crit, I feel like it's just fine. You get like 6% with all three.
Yeah, something like that. I don't think I've ever run a full devastation suit unless it's a bit on a test center doing battlefields, but I feel like devastation overall helps more in world where you're not constantly like switching to rifle abilities for like cluster bomb, your grenades, because that crit also affects your grenade damage as well, where devastation will not.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I will say, in the battlefields where I tend to do the most damage, it's when I'm wearing my devastation suit. But between my numbers and the next highest commando, who I assume would be using crit, I don't see anything higher than usually like 100k, which could probably be made up by a very well placed cluster bomb. So it's not like it's the end all be all just to have devastation. About a year ago, I think I looked at the code for it, and it guarantees that when it procs, the lowest damage level on your heavy weapon becomes your top damage, and I believe your top damage is doubled. So if you're using a CR1 that's capped here on Legends, I believe it's 1706, 1709, somewhere in there, your minimum damage for that weapon becomes 1709, and just multiply that number by 2 for when you proc a devastation. And you can devastate and crit at the same time, so you're going to be doing massive damage when both of them line up like that.
Yeah, that's pretty much my understanding as well. I don't know like all the intricacies of it, but that sounds about right to me.
Yeah, and I've always seen that devastation procs pretty regularly. Like I see it maybe every third shot I'd see a devastation proc. But obviously that's full RNG, but it's just nice seeing the devastation proc just pop up on your screen. You just see that fat damage number.
And it can proc on multiple people, I believe, from the splash damage, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Power-ups, I assume you guys just run full heavy weapon damage?
Yeah, so when I'm loading up battlefields, I'll just use, straight up heavy weapon damage. I will pup the offhand gun, is what I call it, like for a rifle or whatever
Sure.
you're using. I'll pup that with straight crit, just because you're really switching to that for the grenade procs, so that'll help when you're using just generic crit.
Yeah, I just use straight up heavy weapon damage too. But for my rifle, I put it's weird, but I put healing potency just because I usually, when I go out for nades, I have my rifle out, and if I'm getting like bursted down, I don't know, I just feel like having that extra little heal is good.
Alright, as far as weaponry goes, it's pretty standard just to use the cold heavy, which is CR1 or CR2, and that is mostly to do with, its damage is considerably higher than the other heavy weapons, and the cold proc is much better than any other cold proc in the game. And you can splash that onto multiple targets, so as long as you're not like running quadruple commando, I would say pretty much all commandos on the same team should be running CR1.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I don't really see many battlefields where people are running more than 2 commandos a team, just because it becomes a lot to manage and kind of gets unbalanced very quickly, just because, you know, commando is a very high damage class. But there are, you know, certain situations like, you know, if we're running off nominal battlefields where we only have 5 people and, you know, you only have 1 officer on each side, maybe you could afford switching to something else. I wouldn't disqualify yourself from battlefields if you don't have one. Certainly use like a heat gun or something so you're not overriding the more useful procs.
Sure.
For sure, recommend cryo, and in cases where you don't have that, just do heat.
Yeah, and if you do have multiple commandos with multiple elements, and the other enemy team is low on medics, you can be really annoying with all those dots too. That's something to consider depending on the situation you're in. All right, so I think we can go ahead and move on to expertise. For most commandos, I would say that we all pretty much have more or less the same expertise, with some minor variation. I assume we're all taking the full stand fast line, right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, and with the cooldown, I would say that's pretty essential.
Yeah, so with that line, I do definitely recommend taking the whole thing. I want to put some particular emphasis on the blast resistance box. I think that's probably one of the best boxes to invest all 4 points in if you can get away with it. Negates AoEs if you know, certain ones proc up. It helps take the heat off of the medics when you get hit with an SFP by an officer, potentially. There were some troll builds a while back that I was trying out with where I'd only grab stand fast, but if you start to make a name for yourself in the battlefield scene, people will figure that out really quick. So your mileage on that can vary. So if you're just a beginner, I just recommend doing full stand fast.
I've actually been trying just 2 in blast resistance, so 10% AoE resistance, and I put 2 in you'll regret that, just because I don't know, I just think the 200 extra or 2000 extra armor when you're dired, it could help you significantly, I think, just because you're probably at like around 15k by then. But I just been trying that out and I've seen pretty good results. But yeah, definitely blast resistance is definitely a very good box. Like you get 20% AoE resistance for 4 points.
Yeah. That'll help you against commandos. That'll help you against officers. Burn against BH. You know, anything.
Yeah. So I would definitely recommend You'll Regret That for any kind of solo play. Definitely. Actually, a mix of both would be great if you're doing solo play and group play. So that's definitely a valid play style. So the next I would say is going back to the top of the tree is suppressing fire.
For me, I have 1 extra point, the box after suppressing fire, just because I have an extra point. But yeah, suppressing fire, I think is super underrated. I think, in my opinion, it's the best dyer in the game, just because it just works really well, and it works kind of weird, but when it's actually working, like there's almost no chance that person running at you who has suppressing fire on them is gonna ever get to you.
It's the most annoying movement reduction in the game, I would find. Yeah.
Basically, you can negate any kind of push. You know.
Sure. So moving along to Cluster Bomb. This is a very powerful ability in the right situations. I would always recommend maxing this whole tree out, as well as Killing Spree. So yeah, we'll come back to those later, but let's go ahead and fill out the last bit of the first page. I also would recommend getting the full armor break boxes.
Hell yeah, those are definitely good, I think.
Especially combined with the Juggernaut set. These.
Yeah, and it's just 1 more AoE you can throw out too with your spam. The cooldown's fairly short, so.
So, do either of you guys use the stem armor box?
I get the point after it. Sometimes. I have it right now. For the stem armor ability itself, it's kind of a really weak box for a tier 4. I'm not really sure why they left it the way they did, because it only heals you 5 ticks, and I think if I recall correctly, like 500 a tick. So, and that's over 30 seconds.
For me, I don't even touch those boxes. like I said, I put my extra point into suppression, the suppression efficiency. But yeah, I tried it, but yeah, I think stem armor's pretty garbage. As compared to anything else you can get.
Yeah, and the medic heal over time is much more powerful. So I would say if you're a solo PvPer, that's something you could look at, but otherwise it's kind of niche in use. Not even really gonna talk about remote detonator unless you guys have something to comment about it.
I think it should be removed so that way potential new players don't fall into the trap. But other than that, I have nothing productive to say about the box.
Yeah, same here. I've actually never even read the far left line, to be honest. Seems pretty useless though.
All right, moving on to the second page, we have 4 points to expend on the first line. You have luck, precision, constitution, stamina. I usually go with 2 points con, 2 points luck.
I'll go back and forth between the luck and precision, but currently I'm luck. But I mean, they're so negligible in my opinion at that level. I don't really think that you're really going to be losing battlefields because of 50 precision luck.
I'll talk about the position secured line and the rifle line just to get those out of the way. If you've ever tried position security, I mean, you'll know that it roots you, and that's not really ideal to have in PvP, but some people like to take it in their builds anyway. Not something I would highly recommend, but if you guys have any comments on that.
So I had experimented with a build about a year ago when we were doing the first season of Battlefields. And there were some times where it would actually come in handy, especially when your group gets dire rooted. I don't recommend picking up an ability for bad plays, because in ideal circumstances you shouldn't be getting dire rooted, but it was there just kind of a just in case thing. So you could throw it up while you're dire rooted since you're not going to be able to move anyway, but even then you have dead points in a tree you're not going to be using 90% of the time in the regular battlefield. So it was really just kind of a gimmick build, and I don't recommend people doing that just for normal battlefields.
Yeah, it's like the whole you can't root me, I root myself kind of deal. But yeah, I definitely don't. I don't pick up position secured just because I feel like everything else that I have is way worth than having something that like you said, you don't use 90% of the time, and when you do use it for 10% of the time, it's usually when you're pretty screwed. So
the buffs are really nice from it. I will say that, but like you guys are saying, it's not worth the root. So there's really nothing to say about the rifle line. Do not get it. Do not put any points into it, and that's about it.
Yeah, the rifle line. Yeah,
it's actually,
unless you want a meme or something.
I think it's the worst line of expertise out of every expertise in the game. There's nothing redeemable about it. There's no viable build you can put around it.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. I'm just tabbing through it right now, and I don't even know what they were thinking. Like, focus fire action. Okay, that's not gonna be helpful at all for 2 points.
Yeah. With that out of the way, let's move on to the far left line, which is your heavy weapon abilities. You'll definitely want to pick up this full line minus the last box. If you have 3 points available, you should put them in the blast resistance box, I would say. Is that
blast
agreeable?
Radius? Yeah, blast radius. Yeah, that's what I do. Definitely the 3 meter increase can actually do some pretty good shit for you.
So once you have these 4 points invested in the second line, then you can select the Tabana gas box, which comes right after focus beam, which increases your damage to up to 8%. So that's a 4-point box which you can max out, and then after that you get your second heavy weapon attack, which is lethal beam. So this is pretty much your bread and butter for heavy weapon attacks. You should always get these. If you may have a point or two left, so at this point you can either do what Brotein does and throw that into suppressing fire efficiency. If you want to experiment with stem armor and the diagnostic armor, you can try that out. I personally like to put my very last point into the blast radius, the fourth point into it, just to increase the grenade radius by another point.
I think kind of what Commando is really going for is most of what you want to get is in that first page, the Commando tree. You want to make sure you have enough points for your heavy weapon abilities. So once you pick all that up, everything should pretty much be in the Commando tree, in my opinion.
All right, so we have expertise out of the way. I think we can move on to the abilities. So first thing is Burn Down, which is your damage over time ability. Obviously, if you know anything about Commando, you know that Commandos can stack dots up to a 10 stack. So you should try to be hitting this off cooldown to put pressure on Medic.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like, Burn Down, off cooldown, and so are the other 3 next abilities that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, these first 4 abilities are your spam abilities that you're really going to be 1, 2, 3, 4ing throughout the whole fight.
Yeah, unless like sometimes I just hold on to the 2 beams, or if someone's like in-capped, and when they get back up, you can just destroy them, delete them instantly with them. But yeah, I usually, most of the time, I'm just spamming these 4 abilities and getting Carpal Tunnel.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with all that. Use those off cooldown. There's, at least with Burn Down and Riddle Armor, or Armor Shredder, as it were, you really want to be using those off cooldown. There's not really going to be any tactical advantage to holding onto them. They're so short cooldown that it's not like you're going to be losing out on an opportunity by holding onto them or anything. So just make sure you use them all the time.
And it's worth noting that Commando is the only profession that can armor break aside from BH. And it is very important that the Commando is armor breaking because it is a COE ability. And, BH can only single target armor break, while you can get quite a few people to get that armor break stack up. All right, I think that's pretty much all there is to those 2 abilities. Your next ones are your Focus Beam and Lethal Beam. Those are your 2 primary heavy weapon attacks, which you can use from 64 meter range.
Just know that they use a lot of action, so have an officer handy.
Yep, a lot of action, but also does a lot of damage. So, Lethal Beam, the action drain, really negligible. I don't even pay attention to that. I just look for the fat number that pops up after I click it.
And if you are struggling for action, I would say if you have to choose
flame your offies.
Yeah, well, I would say that if you have to choose between the 2 abilities and you have a little bit of action, choose Focus Beam, because I think it has a faster cooldown, does it not? And it takes less action.
Yeah, I think Focus Beam is considerably faster. I think I can get like 2 or 3 Focus Beams off in the cooldown of 1 Lethal Beam.
All right, so with those abilities out of the way, move along to Plasma Mine. Now, I think this is just something you need to ingrain into your mind to just spam it off cooldown.
For Plasma Mine, I don't think I ever use it. I probably pop it just to me, maybe like a top of stairs going up to roof. I just pop it there just so people get hit with it. But I don't think I really even use it.
Yeah, I definitely, if you have 2 officers, you're never going to miss the action. I say that, but given some of the action problems we've had lately, but I still try to use it off cooldown. It's a free ability. It actually pulses longer than the ability cooldown, so you can get like a double pulse sometimes. You're pretty much getting free damage out of it, and if you're already running in for grenades, you can drop one of those 2, and if they choose to stay in the area or if they're dire rated, you're just getting extra damage off. So it's kind of a free ability, and it doesn't contend with the cooldown of anything else, so just use it if you have it.
Well, looks like I'm going to be using Plasma Mine next time.
Yes, they're about to get sweatier.
Yeah, right?
So for me, I bind Plasma Mine to my spacebar. I just like hit it every 5 or 6 seconds so that I have it up at all times. As long as I'm not having action problems, because Plasma Mine is action heavy. But if you're in a battlefield where you are on top of the enemy team a lot, throwing grenades, or even like falling back quite a bit, I think that Plasma Mine overall is going to rack up your damage, like Tricky was saying.
Another hidden benefit of it too is when you actually use it, it does give you kill meter for each time it ticks on somebody. So if you're hurting to get your cluster bombs out because you haven't gotten to that 20 mark threshold, if you put one of those down within range of somebody, tag 5 people, you're getting 5 people a tick. So you're getting 5 kilometer points all the time.
Okay, well, I think that about covers that. We can move on to suppressing fire if you'd like. I would just like to say that I like to save suppressing fire for bounty hunters when I can, because it's a nice, especially if they're just like a charge at you all the time, BH. That's gonna stop them dead in their tracks, especially if they have dire snare recourse. It's a nice option to have.
Yeah, suppressing fire is probably one of my favorite abilities on Mando, just because I mean, you get a dire, basically a snare, so which is pretty cool because Commandos obviously don't really have anything for CC, and they have no snare breaks. So having something that's kind of different than any other ability in the game, I think it's a big plus for Commando.
So we can move on to the kill meter abilities next, starting off with Killing Spree. There is a certain distinction I would make here. There's certain situations where if you only have the 20 points and you have to choose between Killing Spree and Cluster Bomb, you do have to make a kind of a situation, a decision. I like to have Killing Spree up often as I can, just because that's like a lot of range damage you're putting out already on top of your AoE splash.
Yeah, for me personally, I use Killing Spree basically off cooldown, unless I know for a fact we're probably going to go in and run them down or something, so I can just have Cluster Bomb up. But yeah, it's just free damage basically, and you really don't have to do anything besides click a button.
Going back to the situation where you kind of have to make a choice, obviously if you see a bunch of them dired with a good BH dire play, or even a smuggler, if they're all bunched up, it is kind of a question how many people are on the other team. If you're talking about 5 people, maybe a cluster bomb would be enough to finish them off. But if you're talking about 8 and they're all looking like they're pretty healthy and you haven't really, snuck out any of the enemy medics back to bombs or anything like that, you might be able to just do a Killing Spree and just keep the pressure on.
Yeah, for Killing Spree for me, or Killing Spree between Killing Spree and Cluster Bomb, I feel like I'm always in a position where I have when I'm running in and I already popped Killing Spree and I'm at like 15 kill meter points and I can't even pop Cluster Bomb. So definitely that's something you should be thinking about. But I have failed many times going in thinking I have the kill meter, but I remember I popped Killing Spree recently and don't even have the points to use Cluster Bomb, and just in front of them with my rifle, I was shooting them with focus fire.
Yeah, so speaking on that, when you do have the 15 points and you need 5 extra points, if you're switching to your rifle, to get that extra 5 points, I would say sweeping fire is probably the best way to do that. A lot of people sleep on this ability and focus fire, but it's a COE ability and it's going to hit a lot of people and it can really build up your kill meter. So if you're just missing that 5-10 points, that can get you right up to where you need to be to fire off that cluster bomb. I think we're gonna move on to just the standard grenades. It's not really a huge talking point, but you get 3 basic grenades throughout your your profession wheel. They are frag, cryo, and stun grenades. Some people also tend to sleep on these abilities, and they're just like heavy weapon spammers. I think it's pretty vital as a commander to be using these when you can, but not to the point to where you are putting yourself in a position to be farmed. So you need to use these smart. If you can use them off cooldown and get away with it, that's great. Do that, but just be smart about it.
Yeah, I just use those grenades when I go for cluster bombs. I'm not like going out of my way just to get in their face and throw some grenades. So yeah, I just usually have it just. So yeah, I just basically use those 3 grenades in conjunction with cluster bomb.
Don't die just to get out extra damage. I've seen commandos do that, and while they do have very impressive exports, they've kind of killed their team. And I mean, it's just not worth it. And just to kind of go forward more into the grenades, they do use a lot of action.
Yeah, on that, I definitely, whenever I go in for like my cluster bomb volley and my grenades and everything, it basically takes up my whole green bar, the whole action bar, just to throw all of them out, like sweep and fire and focus fire.
Yeah, the good thing about Commando is you can actually do a ton of damage with no action because you have that heavy weapon splash, you have burn down and armor shredder, which take almost no action. You have killing spree and cluster bomb, which take literally no action. So
Yeah.
Let's talk about stand fast, dude. Stand fast is the shit. I love it.
yeah. So stand fast. Can you give us the exact numbers on it, Tricky?
Yeah, so firing it off, it looks like it lasts about 18 seconds, maybe 16 seconds. Sometimes the server will give or take a couple seconds here when you fire it. With the full box, it'll give you the 6 extra seconds. So I'm guessing maybe base, it'll be a 10-second ability.
And that's a straight 75% damage reduction.
Yeah, that's 75% damage reduction with the 3 points on the bottom. Otherwise, I believe it's just 60. I'd have to verify how long the cooldown is on
I think
it with all the extra.
it's close to.
I want to say
It's either
5 minutes.
3 or 5 minutes because I know the BH's shields are 3 minutes. I haven't played Commando as much as you guys, but 5 minutes sounds about right. I know you can probably use it 2 or 3 times in a BF.
Yeah, and that's really where the last 3 points in the expertise come in handy because it shaves 6 minutes off the cooldown. Pretty massive. So if you don't have those 3 points, you're probably only going to fire it once.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things to note for stand fast though. It is a great ability, probably your best. It is your best ability, just because you probably won't die if you have it up. But there's 2 things that plague it, which is obviously misfires, or not 2 things that plague it, but one main thing that plagues it is misfires. Because since you're spamming so much, when you want to pop stand fast, I've seen it misfire many times when I'm battlefielding.
Yeah, and it can go into the pre-expertise like cooldown to where it's like 15 minutes long, so to where you have to get recalibration to get it right back to the cooldown it should be.
Yeah, I think we should probably talk about recalibration just because since this Commando is such a spammy class, like having popping recalibration every other or often is actually really useful. In addition to that, for Standfest, I feel like it's like a big communication thing. You should always let your medics know when you're popping it, let everyone know when you're popping it, because it's mainly, or for me, I mainly use it if I'm gonna get in their face and try to pressure them, make them just go right at them, run them down. In addition to that, I pop stand fast at really low health, so all I usually say to my medics, like, just give me a couple ampules and I'll be good. Save your bombs for other people because I'm probably not gonna die when I have it up.
Yeah, don't be surprised if you end up throwing up this ability and immediately getting stasis, because this ability really enables you to bully people, and for that matter, bully the other team, because you're basically an AoE machine. So I like to throw this up and start charging in, obviously with team coordinated, so that way you're not just doing it blindly. But when you throw this up, you know the other team means business. A lot of time I'll throw it up and immediately get stasis, so all my damage output just gets immediately eaten. But keep in mind, if that happens, your officers are now, there's now one less ability for an officer to get stasis against, so they can pop their SFP and contribute where you couldn't. So it's good to use it to bait out some stasises every once in a while.
Oh yeah, definitely. You, like, with killing spree and you're going ham with your stand fast. I feel like, if you get stasis, you did one thing right, because an officer SFP is going to be doing way more damage, in my opinion, than you sitting there for 10 minutes blasting away. Just because the spike damage of SFP is so big, you can just end a fight right then and there.
And if you can get away with having stand fast up and not getting stasis and getting all of these cluster bombs and stuff off, you are like the main threat to the enemy team. It doesn't even come close.
Oh, I do, yeah, dude. That's like the best part about Mando, where you just feel like a god and you can just run into them, just sit there and just shit on their chest.
For sure.
Just soak up the damage.
All right, I think that covers our abilities. Just a few more topics left. One is about maximizing your damage output. I mean, I think we covered a lot of this already. I don't know, we didn't go too much into free targeting. That's a really tactical thing to do whenever you're not necessarily in line of sight of people. You can free target if they're standing behind the corner. You can still hit them, and that's extra damage they have to heal off, more dots that they have to heal from passive application.
Yes, that's a good point. So when we're speaking of free targeting, it's not necessarily the case where you're free targeting whoever you please. It's actually going into manual aim mode and firing around corners. So
Yeah, I actually don't free target much. I probably do it when like the enemy is getting to their corner just to blow up some bikes maybe and do a
And
little
I
bit
think
of
that's
damage.
when most people do that. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm usually like calling assist. So I found that if you have it on free aim and you're trying to call assist, it like clears your target or it switches targets when you don't want it to. So I don't use free targeting, but I feel like if I wasn't calling assist and I was just free targeting, I feel like you'd be putting out a good amount more damage just because there's no LOS. You're just going to be doing, you have so much more uptime doing heavy weapon damage just because you're just shooting.
Another benefit of that too is it actually removes your passive miss chance that you get when you're auto targeting. I know you're using an AoE gun, but your passive miss chance on your focus beam and lethal beam, those are actually single target attacks, so they can still parry and dodge. I don't know about parry, I have to test with Jedi, but normally you'll be able to dodge it still, but your normal miss chance will be gone when you're manually.
That moves on to the next point, which is the focal point of your splash damage. If you are using these AoE abilities, which obviously you have a lot of, you're not going to want to use them necessarily on a person in the edge of the group. If possible, you want to try to hit the dead center of the group so you hit as many people as possible. And this is going to take a little bit of practice, and it may require you, as long as you're not running the assist, to break away from the assist briefly to get your volleys off and whatnot. But you're going to be much more effective with your damage output if you are being smart about this, where you're throwing your abilities.
Yeah, I feel like it's really similar to officer volleys. Just try to target the guy in the heart of the group. Especially with nades. Like if you throw them, since I mean, you saw we're putting 3 points for 3 meters extended range. So obviously you're going to want to try to hit the middle of the group, right?
And you'll get better at that over time.
And with that, you also want to be hitting damage buffs if you have them, like Lair Crystal and Binox, Hoth Radio, potentially your IG head. I mean, that's pretty much universal for every DPS class, though. So
yeah, most definitely.
The next closest class that I think worries about that is Officer with the grenade placement when they're going for an SFP charge. So if you get good at this, maybe Officer will be up your alley, which will be coming up in another video.
All right, just a couple other things. A helpful tip that I've found to do is before you're loading into a battlefield, you can get your kill meter up before the battlefield, like on a target dummy or something. And once you are like reaching the enemy and you're about to engage, you'll still have like something around 20 points left. So that's a free killing spree for you. Just a helpful little tip there.
Yeah, right. So I find that if you have 50 before you go into the BF, you have literally right around 20 right when you see the enemy. So yeah, either you're going to just need to shoot a couple times to get to 20 and then pop killing spree, or you'll have it outright.
We touched on it earlier, but you do have some communication you need to give to the rest of your team, namely your stand fast cooldown, and when you're using it, like Brotein said earlier. I find that it's also a good idea to call out whenever you've used suppressing fire on someone like a BH running in.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Whenever I do suppressing fire BH, I do just say they're fucked because they're going to be walking towards you. Because, it blue balls BHs like almost every time. So, and I've never seen a miss or anything. So, yeah, suppressing fire, definitely communication.
And maybe the last thing I would say that you should probably communicate is if you're about to do like a really high damage volley on a team, if you're about to throw all of your grenades, all of everything, and maybe you have your damage buffs up, maybe just let your team know that they're about to get hit pretty hard, and so that they can try to coordinate their hard-hitting abilities like cover fire and officer AoEs, so you can have a chance at wiping them completely.
Yeah, that would be a really good thing to do, especially on targets that are Doom procced or hit with Dread Strike. If you throw a high damage volley thing on them, the medics are going to have a hard enough time getting the heal debuffs off of them. but you're talking about a grenade volley, you know, it has a potential to do 12 to 15,000 damage, that they're pretty much going to die. So you might want to clue your team in that you're about to go do that.
Yeah, other than that, I mean, Commando is a very versatile profession, I think. But I just think that other than that, like, you should be really focusing on communication, kind of map awareness, and positioning always. I think the number one thing for a good Commando is positioning. I mean, I guess that kind of applies to every class, but yeah, since you don't have much to do, you can excel at other things. That's what I just have to say about Commando.
Well, I think that about covers the profession. Thanks for coming along, guys. I appreciate all the input.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yep. Peace.